billahi minash shaitanir rajim. It's Layya Mahmuna and the topic which we are going to present is about relationship between language and culture.
Now, what is language? Language is a system of spoken, manual, or written symbols through which human beings express themselves. It is the language which helps us to communicate, play, and imagine. Language allows us to interact with the world and define who we are. Humans are at the mercy of language they speak. Language is individual. For larger languages spoken across various regions, each country, culture, or community adds their own vocabulary and ideas to the language. As a result, language allows us to communicate and connect to a larger group of people, but we still maintain our individuality within language. No two people speak exactly alike. We all have our own speech patterns and habits.
How are languages divided? Due to the variances of speech from person to person, it is difficult to define exactly when different speech patterns become a completely new language. Linguists categorize a different language as the moment when two groups of people cannot understand one another without some prior learning or teaching. With the bigger world languages, this distinction seems rather obvious. However, the boundaries between languages become slightly muddied when dealing with the smaller dialects, which can differ by community but still have a great deal in common. Lanja, for example, is categorized as one language by linguists, but is really a group of dialects that have many common characteristics.
Now, what is culture? The word culture actually comes from the Latin term colere, which means to grow something from the earth. In a sense, our culture is what grew us together. Culture is the characteristics and thought patterns of a group of people. Generally, we define culture by using the obvious external categories such that language, religion, cuisine, arts, and traditions. As Patel says in 2002 that culture is just like a banana flower or onion, exists in layer. We can only understand if we peel it layer by layer, cover by cover. However, it is easier said than done. The outer layer is easy to perceive as it comprises concrete and tangible manifestations like art, monuments, foods, and languages, etc. The middle layer consists of norms and values, and hence it takes us some time to unfold it. The inner layer is rather difficult to penetrate because it subsumes assumptions about birth, life, death, happiness, and so on. So, culture is the art elevated to a set of beliefs. However, culture goes much deeper than that. Culture teaches us how to think, interact with those around us, and how to view our world. This is your cultural lens. How you perceive the diverse cultures existing in the society is known as your cultural lens. Interestingly, people living in the same society having similar characteristics may have different cultural views and ideas, which depends on several different factors. Thus, it is important to mention that different people living together can have their own ideas and their cultural lens may vary. Now, what is the relationship between language and culture? So, language and culture are interlinked, and you cannot learn one of these without having a clear understanding of the other. When we study a language, which is an abstraction of abstractions, a system of systems, we have to study its further abstractions such as dialects, sociolects, idiolects, etc. the culture where the language belongs be referenced because language is very much ingrained in the culture. Is all of us have a culture and a language. Our culture and language point us toward our people and dictate how we view the world. Language and culture are intertwined. A particular language usually points out to a specific group of people. When you interact with another language, it means that you are also interact with the culture that speaks the language. You cannot understand one's culture without accessing its language directly. Culture impacts our core traditions, values, and the way we interact with others in society. On the other hand, language makes those interactions easy. Simply, language facilitates social interactions while culture helps us to learn how to behave and interact with others. In short, you can't have one without the other. Britannica states, language interacts with every aspect of human life in society and it can be understood only if it is considered in relation to society. When Yang Xiang beautifully compares the relationship between language and culture to an iceberg. Language and some aspect of culture are at the tip of the iceberg, the part you see above the water. Yet, the majority of what forms the iceberg is culture, hides below the surface. Another analogy for the relationship between language and culture is that of a person. Language is the flesh and culture is the blood. You put the two together and you have a whole person. However, one without the other results in death. Changes in language often reflects the changing values of a culture. Like for example, we take the example of a directional system of the Aboriginal people who do not have the relative directions like we have, such take left, right, ups, down, etc. Instead of using that, they use the cardinal and quadrantial points to indicate the location of things. Therefore, unlike most of us, instead of saying, "Can you pass the salt on your right?" they will say, "Can you please pass the salt on your north?" It shows that how a language interacts with our minds and how language shapes the way we think. Another example is about the people of Praha who have only 3 numbers in their language, 1, 2, and many. They had great difficulty in comprehending the differences between say 4 and 5, which was considered to be a sign that because their language do not include the lexical items for 4 and 5, so their mind was not able to make that difference. So our words are limited to our vocabulary and our mother tongue. Language can help from Institute of Technology agreed that when you lose a language, a large part of the culture goes too, because much of that culture is encoded in the language. If we took the example of the dead languages, so Sanskrit, which is the ancient language of Hinduism and is used in many religions, which include Jainism, Buddhism, Sikhism, etc. Sanskrit served as the main language of a lot of ancient poetry, drama, and religious texts. Its prominent role in literary tradition make it an incredibly important language for many scholars to understand. It is a complex language that has hundreds of words for a single meaning or words, and now we can find that only 600 people in Nepal are using it as a colloquial language, and many of the users of that language is mostly dead, and even we can not find their culture in many areas. Now here comes the question, which came first, culture or language? Although we do not have proof of what the first languages looked like, linguists argue that language is innate. All beings communicate in some way. Therefore, both language and culture play a significant role in shaping your personality. Culture tells you how to interact with others and helps to shape values and ethics. Besides, it keeps you close to like-minded people and thus the sense of belonging strengthens your bond with society. On the other hand, language is like a tool using which you express your culture. In fact, cultural ideas and beliefs are transmitted ahead by language. Means that culture and language both shapes person's identity. Culture dictates that how we interact and react to the world around us and binds us to like people group and gives us a sense of belonging. While language on the other hand is one way to express culture. Language allows us to pass down cultural stories and ideas as well as communicate our own thoughts and beliefs. Furthermore, both the culture and language allow us to peek into the past and shape our ideas. Means culture and language give us a window into our past and guide us to who we should become. Although our culture and native language form the basis of our identity, they do not write the final chapter. They are our starting point that help us navigate the roads of life and serve as our compass, always able to point us back home. How we think, speak, and interact with others around us is determined by our cultural values. Likewise, language also impacts human thoughts. As mentioned earlier, the language and culture continue to evolve, and so does our personality. As we meet people belonging to different cultures, we get to learn more and explore more, and interaction with them can impact our personality as well. Yet, just as culture and language are constantly changing, so is one's sense of identity. Over time, through interaction with people who do not share our cultural background, our sense of self becomes more complex. As we begin to identify with new people groups, some of our cultural ideas are challenged. In those moments of challenge, we must make a choice: reject this new person or reject a cultural norm. The more we are willing to venture out of our comfort zone and explore other languages, cultures, and ideas, the more our cultural context and sense of identities are challenged and pushed to grow. We begin to find pieces of our identity all around the world instead of just in one specific community. At last, I would like to say that the more you know about the cultural background of a language, the faster you can learn that language. If you aspire to learn any foreign language, remember that understanding of culture is going to be an integral part of your learning journey. For learning any language, it is essentially important to know about the culture of the people who speak that language. In addition to having expertise in the language, you also need to consider socio-cultural aspects and learn how to properly address people in that foreign language. To cut a long story short, language and culture are inseparable.